Hello and welcome to the Shifting Lens podcast, where we are viewing the animal experience. Today, I'm joined by the fabulous and eloquent co-host of this podcast, Rebecca Madrid, and our brilliant guest of this episode, Ivan Tacey. But when I'm reading graphic novels, I was telling Rebecca before the recording that I like sort of his style of journalism, and I like the way that he has the images and the way he portrays things. And I think this sort of jumping back and forth between things that you mentioned in terms of like just having a bit more movement in how you're presenting your experience being in that place was a lot more fluid, had a lot more movement in it than just if it was text. And I noticed that the more I was reading those types of graphic novels, that I was like, this is like an academic publication, like the way he's talking about how he's getting the information, the way he's presenting things as direct quotes from interviews and everything. And the images just brought so much more into it. And there were a lot of points where I think it just drew me back to how individualistic the information is. Like you were saying, you're not generalizing this across all BATEC, it's just the people that you were speaking with.
Yeah.
And I think because it's an image and you're seeing the person speaking, and then you're taking some time and looking at the images and seeing the animals in the background and seeing what the sort of the dynamics of the people, that it always sort of drew me back to that a bit more. And you kind of, you have more of an emotional response to it. And then I started thinking like, oh, this would be such a great way if this was brought more into academia, that you had this type of presentation of findings and things and published it in this way. And then my immediate thought was like, well, they already call it the soft sciences and everything. And if you now say that you're going to be having like an academic journal with a comic style or graphic novel style articles or findings or something, that's just, like, will people take it seriously? And on the other hand, would it be better, or would it be, I just curious about your thoughts going through this process, if that's changed your feelings about that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot in that too. I mean, why is it that we take text more seriously than words? Okay, and this is an issue that's addressed. Actually, there's a couple of people who discuss this here. Tacey discusses it a bit in this book, which is a great book there. I swear I saw this. Drawings in my fieldwork notebooks, namely my own. Andrew Cowsey talks about it in this book, Drawn to See. Drawing as an ethnographic method. There's another book upstairs, I should have brought it down actually, called Making Comics. I've forgotten the name of the author. She's really great American. She's not actually an anthropologist, but she talks about making comics. And she raises really interesting points. So if you go back to kind of Middle Ages and you look at Middle Age texts from Middle Ages, you've got this beautiful kind of writing, which is almost like drawing itself, the writing, the calligraphy. And it's filled with images. The first letter will be maybe, let's say, an owl or something with an E or an O in it, And the way people presented texts in medieval kind of religious documents, it was a combination of writing and drawing. So, for example, this book, we're talking about natural sciences. This is natural history drawings. This is from Malaysia as well. The complete William Farquhar collection from the Malay Peninsula. And I'll just show you, so you've got, these beautiful pictures of plants and fruit, okay? If you look back to the time of William Farquhar, Charles Darwin, Wallace, all these kind of explorer, natural historians, they were all drawing as well, okay? So kind of over time, I would argue, and many other people would argue the same thing, is that social scientists, but also other natural scientists too, in efforts to be taken more seriously, have kind of made their work ever more dry and boring. There's something about text is serious. And also, if you think about writing styles, particularly if you read social science works from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it's really dull and boring. Okay, so you had a kickback against that with people like Clifford Geertz, for example, in anthropology. What's the guy, the American anthropologist who worked with the Western Apache? Basso, Keith Basso, okay? He writes beautifully. You've got Daniel Miller from
Yeah.
United Kingdom, you know, with this much more literary style writing. As a push against that, you had as well Paul Stoller and his work on sensuous ethnography. And I mean, good writing can push you into new spaces and makes you kind of understand information in different ways, and drawings do that too. So I think it's a real shame the way that graphic novels are not taken that seriously. And this is a very Anglo-American thing, by the way. In France, where I spent you know, a long part of my life, at least 17 years living in France, graphic novels are taken extremely seriously. It's another great form of art. And also in France, you've got millions of independent bookstores selling graphic novels, because not everyone's buying their books from Amazon. So the way that these independent publishers remain afloat in France is because you've got independent bookstores. Do you see what I mean? So they're selling these independent houses of publications books there, whereas Amazon, if you just buy your books from Amazon or one of these, what are they called on the high streets in Great Britain, you know, the kind of bookshops,
Yeah.
they're all chains. So they buy thousands of books published, you know, by the same person, whereas, you know, in a small publishing house, you might only publish a few thousand copies of a book or something. So the French take it completely differently. It is seriously. And in fact, one great thing is, for example, you've got the University of Toronto Press in the ethnographic series. They put out quite a few graphic novels. So you've got this one I thought I'd mention, Gringo Love, which is all about sex tourism in Brazil. It's really a very good book. On the same series, you've got this kind of philosophical anthropology by Lachlan Jane, Things of Art, a graphic menagerie of enchanting curiosity, which is really good fun. And I'll just show you a couple of pictures from it. So it's all about classificatory systems. So, you know, he chooses something, then explores it, how that kind of classification works through his own pictures, you know. But it's really quite an interesting book. You've got this guy's not really an anthropologist, but they're quite anthropological. So I don't know how you pronounce his name, Guy Delisle. Pyongyang, A Journey into North Korea, I really enjoyed. And this book, Factory Summers, as well.
Right, yeah.
There's all kinds of ones. And like I say, Joe Sacco's not an anthropologist either, he's a journalist, but his book, I mean, I think sometimes his books are a bit too long. I would do shorter, I think, but they're really fantastic too. But yeah, going back to, I think it's time, I don't think anthropologists or anthrozoologists or sociologists, criminologists, whoever, should be frightened of using imagery, because we're already not very good at communicating ideas to the wider public in the same way. So if you think about New York Times bestseller lists, you've often got linguists on there, like Steven Pinker. You get biologists on there, like Dawkins. You frequently get economists on there. You know, studying economics, not very, you don't think of it as a very interesting subject compared to anthrozoology or anthropology or criminology, do you? But why are we not on the New York Times bestseller list? I think because we haven't achieved that way of communicating with the wider public. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying my book's going to do really well. Who knows? We might not do well at all. But it's nice to try to communicate in a different way. And I mean, there's lots of other ways of doing it as well. There's anthropological poetry now. I think that's an amazing idea. You've got anthropological performances. There's a whole host of other ways of doing good science or good social science.
Yeah.
That's right.
This actually started thinking about this in the with Dr. Tom Rice at Exeter. He had a bioacoustics module, and what I found really great in that, which might be kind of a cool pairing if someone ever did sort of like a digital graphic novel type thing with maybe some sound clips in there as well.
Cool.
Because I had an article for there where I just took like little sound bits and put it in certain parts of the essay that I was writing, or the paper that I was writing for that class. And I think it was so much more fun because you could add things instead of describing what the bird sounds like or what the person farting sounded like. You can just put the sound clip in there and people can just play it and hear it. And I was like, oh, this would be so cool. I know there are journals who do, of course, have audio that they're digital and you can add that in, but that might be interesting to have the images as well with the audio. I'm not sure if people are doing that already to some extent.
I agree entirely. I mean, if you think about it, if you go back to when we were just publishing books and papers, you're kind of constrained by the format, and you can't put a sound clip in a book or a journal paper. But now, because most people will read journal papers through their computers, and a lot of people will actually read books through Kindles and things, why not? And also you can hyperlink them to different places. You can have, you can definitely have sound in there. You can have as many images as you want in there. You can have video in an article, or so I don't see why people are so conservative in the way they represent their work. Yeah. So hopefully that, but I think there's a growing movement away from that now. Yeah. But I think it's the way that we teach students. When I teach my students, I get them out drawing. I get them out doing all these other methods like sensorial walks, soundscape walks, and so forth, to try to get them think about that, because you need to learn it you need to learn different ways of doing good ethnography, I think.
Yeah, I think for so many people, they're even concerned about using the first person. Like, oh my gosh, you said I, you said me, and you're it's like,
yeah, I've never really understood what's all that about, really.
Yeah. It always comes as a bit of a shock then if you did it in first person. It's like, ooh, risky. But it's a shame because so many more people would read it. Sure. And you're a better researcher anyway if you can say things as they are and just use the way that you would speak, but in a written form.
But again, isn't it because people are all afraid of being taken seriously? It's all about scientism. It's not scientific, it's scientistic, if you like. It's kind of, you won't use the first person because you think it's not serious enough. It hasn't got that,
let's invent a new term and put that in there and then coin it.
Seems very strange to me, But a kind of, it's this inferiority complex, isn't it? That, oh, we're social scientists, we have to. But then if you look at some writing, particularly, let's say, in sociology or criminology, people have started putting in kind of algebraic formulations into text. This really kind of, it's just a way of trying to be as scientific and positivistic as possible, to be taken more seriously, I guess, by policymakers. I don't know, but it becomes very boring, and it's not really scientific. I don't think you can reduce human interactions with other humans or their environment or other species to algebraic formulations or things like that.
But Ivan, they've calculated it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
They've done the math, Ivan. That's how it is. So
I think too the whole first third person thing is very much a positivist hangover. It's that fear of being perceived subjective, right?
Yep.
If I use I in a sentence, then it's about me. It's about my experience. It's subjective, and we have to be objective and generalizable, right? And I think it's interesting that on paper, we're so far past that, but we're really not. It's still there. It's interesting you say that you teach your students to draw. I remember actually in an undergrad qualitative methods course, I actually did have to just go observe people in the school courtyard and sketch.
Super.
And that is the only time that ever happened. That's the only experience I have with that. And it's funny because it stuck with me. Like when I was actually doing research for my master's dissertation, I was sketching while I was there. And I don't know if any of that will ever end up in something I try to publish.
But they're your notes, aren't they? That's just a way of recollecting anyway. And they might, like the Tacey stuff. I should show you some of the pictures. It's not about being a good artist. It's just the way that you engage with paper. But I think lots of people are frightened of drawing. Like, oh no, I'm terrible. Look at that picture.
Yeah, it's pretty shit. Yeah.
Yeah, in technical terms, but he bases several chapters of the book on that image.
Yeah.
I'm not going to explain to ruin the book if I explain like
Right.
that. But it triggers all these thoughts and an exploration of political power and violence in South America, you know, through a drawing. So it's great. But and also he was, I'll give you a little bit of information about it. He was in a taxi when he drew that picture, driving through a tunnel, and he just sees something in the corner of his eye. He looks at it, he asks the taxi driver. Then because he knows it's important, so he draws it because it's the quickest way possibly to get that down. So that's what I mean. It's not about, I mean, in the Farquhar book of the natural history drawings, that, you know, he's done some beautiful drawings, but that's not the only way to use drawing or painting, sketching as an ethnographic method. There's lots of things you can do with it, you know. Yeah. And there was something Rebecca mentioned. What was it that I wanted to say? Oh, it was really, really important. It's about, oh yeah, so it's about the I and the E and the first person, third person. So you guys are studying anthrozoology. Yeah? Let's imagine you were doing a project about bats. I don't know, I'm just picking a random animal, yeah? If you really wanted to understand the life of bats, yeah, wouldn't the best way possible, imagine if a magician said to you, listen, Tiamat, Rebecca, I can transform you into a bat for the day or for the week. You'd be like, that's incredible. You know, I'm going to do that. And you'd become a bat and you'd live as a bat or a snake or whatever animal you're studying. And you'd get all this incredible insights into the life of bats, wouldn't you? Snakes or something. But so I think everyone would agree that would be the best way of learning about another species, don't you think? Well, why is it then that as humans, we're already in human bodies? So when we're talking about human relations, why are we so frightened of drawing upon subjective experiences? You know, we are in a body. It's perfect, isn't it? You know, if you want to write about humans, surely it's great to be a human, to be able to write about humans. But it seems weird to me why people have such hang-ups about appearing too subjective. It's because of positivism, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but you mentioned also in France that there are more. I noticed that when I was in Belgium quite a bit, that it was like on every street corner there was a little, not even an independent bookstore, but an independent sort of just comic shop. And then you went in, and there was just, that's where I stumbled across, because I really like graphic novels with like nonfiction, like kind of the you know, written by journalists and things. It's more of what I just get drawn to. And then you stumble across these, and it's just like, wow, there's just, you get sucked into it so much more. It's such a different way of absorbing information. And like you said, we've been using images to communicate these things for so long. And it's just fascinating. You get wrapped up in something. And I kept thinking, if this was only text, I probably would read it. But then when you see it with images and you see it just sort of forming in that way and unfolding in that way, it just adds so much more to it.
Yeah, and it makes you more emotionally invested.
Exactly.
And that's what people like Paul Stoller talked about through this sensuous writing, he calls it. When you write in a beautiful literary way, you know, let's imagine you're like a great writer, I don't know, Melville or Shakespeare or whatever. Why they're brilliant writers is because they allow us to move into that world and kind of have this, you know, we feel for the characters in the book, or we're shocked by them, or we're troubled by them, or we're disgusted by them, but it's through that writing. And that's what Stoller talks about. It's sensuous writing or sensuous scholarship should force you into new positions. So if, like you said, you know, if you're reading about an episode of violence and it's written about in a very dry, objective sense, there's no way you're going to convey the fear, the atrocity, the disgust, the terror that people experience in these encounters. But likewise, if you're talking about, I don't know, food, let's say, which Paul Stoller talks about a lot. If you're talking, he wrote a book called The Taste of Ethnographic Things, you know. You need to write in a sensuous way to express what things taste like, what they sound like, what they smell like, because we are in a sensuous world, you know. But there's got this political dimension to it all too. You know, it's not purely about bringing writing to life for aesthetics. It's also got that political dimension, because your brain understands the information in a different way. That's what this sudden, like, jarring movement that pushes you into a new awareness, if you like, you know. So that's what I think art or beautiful writing can do.
Yeah, it just makes it more accessible, doesn't it? Like if
Sure.
I'm just looking at sort of like you're talking about jargon earlier, if it's just sort of text and just wordy and kind of sentences that are half a page long and all those kinds of things. If I'm popping over into a field or discipline that I don't know much about, and it's incorporating images and it's incorporating art of some kind in it beyond just writing, that just makes it so much more accessible to me. Or maybe I am someone who doesn't absorb information well through text or something, and I find it a lot easier through images, or, you know, the list goes on. But it just opens it up to such a wider audience, I think, as well.
But say we were taking a more, say we forget social science, we talk about natural science, we're talking about biological evolution. Surely, if you want to understand biological evolutionary processes, visually depicting them really makes things quite clear, doesn't it? Obviously,
exactly.
Changes over time, or change as species very similar, or you can look at all kinds of things. You know, for example, let's think about something that's developed. The eye or the wing has developed countless times in the natural world, completely independently. But by looking at these on a page, you get that idea much quicker than reading, let's say, 20, 30 pages of text. So whether it's natural sciences or social sciences, I don't think it matters. I think the importance is, changing these modes of representation anyway, you know.
So I can't remember who said it or where I got it from, but I remember reading somewhere that particularly when people are absorbing news, tragedy that happens to a number of people at a point becomes a number, it becomes a fact or a statistic, but a tragedy happening to one is something people can connect to emotionally a lot more. And so I wonder if maybe that's a way of empathy building as well. This, these kinds of storytelling with pictures, with those facial features that humans are just designed to connect to. So I'm kind of curious with your graphic novel, is it going to be a lot of portraiture or more environmental art? Like what kind of stuff is John doing?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, he does do a lot of portraits, actually. I wonder if there's any here. I've got one of his books on the table. I mean, this is more, it's not so much, but anyway, we've got a lot of imagery of kind of natural world side of things, you know, the rainforest itself, life in the rainforest. We've got portraits, all kinds of things. But I think what you say, about seeing people's faces, connecting with people that way and looking at their expressions, of course, that can work really well too, definitely. So I'd agree with you there. Oh, I can show you a few pictures, actually.
Oh, yeah, great.
There's some pictures that would probably be from one of the books.
Oh, beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another one you were asking about people, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll see if there's any more. There should be a few more. Oh, we've got a few more here. Another one that's a kind of portrait. This is not from the graphic novel. This is from another book we're doing, which is based on paintings.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, this should be a few more.
So is this a purely image? It's a book with images in it, or is there
This
text
is going to be a book
well?
based on paintings. Okay, there's another two you mentioned about portraits as well. These are two and I work with a lot. Tian, yeah. So that book's going to be, well, John's done lots of the paintings. I think what I'm going to do, we're going to have probably a page of paintings and a page of text kind of discussing some of the issues related to that particular painting, but it'll be more like a conversation between ethnographer and artist, if you like, quite reflexive on what's happening there, but with some background information in as well. Yeah, but again, very different type of book. And then we'll probably have a third book, I hope at least, which is photographic, and we've got some really beautiful photographic images which are very ethnographic, and they're capturing life, you know, when we were there in 2019. So between the forest and the village, because there's a kind of this juxtaposition between life in the village, which is actually kind of quite sad and depressing because the forest has all been cut down around it. Kids are kind of just moping around, not knowing what to do, because there isn't much to do in the village. You know, there's normally, if you're living in the forest, kids are climbing trees, they're catapulting birds, they're fishing or jumping in the rivers and streams. And so you see this real change between the village and the forest. And like Rebecca mentioned, you know, people's faces, you see it on their faces. People in the village kind of, you know, just waiting, this permanently waiting for something to happen. Whereas in the forest, you're constantly on the move, doing things, making things, playing around. The Batek word to explore and play is the same word, pengu. Or if I say to someone, what are you doing today? Oh, yeah, pengu baha, means I'm going to play in the forest, or I'm going to explore the forest. Same thing, you know, and that's really telling about, I think that's how learning occurs, isn't it? Through play, predominantly, whether you're human or non-human, you know. And I like the fact that it's captured in that word, that we separate it artificially, don't we? Like exploration's kind of scientific, and it's kind of caught up with all this kind of white colonial ideas, I think. Whereas play, it's silly and it's for children, you know. But the fact is, of course, exploration in terms of learning about your world all takes place the best way, the most efficient way, through playing, I think.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune into the Shifting Lens podcast. Any articles or books and so on that we've or Ivan has mentioned today, you'll find in the podcast episode's description, including where you can find out more about Ivan's work, of course, and follow him on socials if you'd like. Please give this episode a like. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments, and definitely follow our page to be notified for future episodes. Thanks and bye.